The Jews were more advanced than us. The weather in the Middle East and the access to all kinds of rich cultures like Egypt, Babylon, Phoenicia, and Athens gave them a rich library of cultural information, including some pretty dark stuff on blood. Jerusalem was an early instance of multiculturalism, like my birth country of Canada and the city of Toronto, where I spent most of my adult life. It has more languages spoken than any other city in the world. Rome was also multicultural. The Jews had their own language, culture, and religion, and so did the Scots. We spoke Gaelic, and our religion was Druidism, a highly advanced system of prayer, ritual, invocation, and self-development. Rome was the Amazon of its day, and Scotland and Israel were family-owned businesses trying to get by. You see what I mean about things never really changing, how the past is the present, and you just need eyes to see it. Druids performed human sacrifices, usually criminals, and they adjudicated all disputes. Their training was quite intense, sometimes years, and they were alleged to possess transcendent powers. Some take them back to the Tuatha De Danann, the Celtic gods associated with Ireland. Mist has them coming in on a mist. The truth is, the mist was an effect created by the portal they came through. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 7:47 p.m. on the 30th of May. I guess we'll call this Blood Part 2, but I'm not going to stick that closely to the book. But there's a lot of more stuff I could have put into the book, but you had to use a certain discernment and a certain discretion and a certain economy to get the overall message across, which I wanted to be hopeful. And the actual situation is considerably less hopeful, I suppose. But that only applies to the macro. You know, on the micro, it's different. You can have a successful life very easily if you apply the discipline and you wake your consciousness through whatever works for you. For some people, it's Jesus, and I think that's real too. For some people, it's Buddhism. For some people, it's, I don't know, Taoism, whatever. Some people tinker with the dark and then balance out with the light and come to a revelation. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is that people wake up. For me, it's been a journey around the world, and a journey around the world's theologies and philosophies and ideas, positive and negative, mainstream and counterculture, and then the really weird occulted stuff I get into as well, stuff like Donald Marshall from Halifax, Nova Scotia, who does all the material on cloning and things like this. But I think that one of the things that I missed in this book, in terms of, there's nothing I missed per se. The book is perfect for what I set out to do. But there's a concept at work here that I think everybody needs to understand. And that is simply that what begins in myth and what begins in Scripture, at least in the West, is the blueprint for going from the mythological to the literal. Okay? Especially in the Western canon, especially in the Abrahamic canon. You should look upon those scriptures, aside from the parts that were written by light-based beings, and there are parts written by light-based beings, there's no doubt about that. But it's an odd amalgamation of things, a kind of scrapbook put together through diaspora living, outright theft from other cultures, old pagan mythologies, and people love to do this treatment on Christ. Christ is just the resurrection of old pagan mythologies, and the sun god dying and resurrected. I mean, this is Jordan Maxwell, right? The sun goes down in the west and rises in the east, and the solstices, marking the biblical calendar. This is all very transparent stuff. This should be fairly well understood by anybody who's got 2 feet in the water, at least up to their ankles, right? You may not have dived in under the waves yet, but if you're at least standing in the water barefoot up to your ankles, you know all of this very, very basic stuff. The deeper stuff is the literalization of the mythological concepts, okay? So when you read the Bible, and when you read, like, for instance, the idea in Jewish theology that everyone in history, or most people in history, will be resurrected in body. What does that mean? Okay? Very difficult to understand, right? Like, how are you going to resurrect somebody who's been cremated? How are you going to resurrect somebody who's been buried for 10,000 years? That's actually possible, But this idea of being resurrected on the earth again is a reference to cloning, okay? And the capturing of souls, in a sense. The capturing of souls by association with the body that they were last born into. There are people on this planet with multiple clones. Cloning is epidemic now. Epidemic. Has been since, I think, the scientific literature goes back to 1938. So, I mean, it's almost 100 years ago, right? It's like 86 years ago. So, if they were into it in 1930, and why 1938? Again, we get back to this 20th century, okay? We get back to this World War II. We get back to this black occult science, this double helix of science and magic, this and the manifestation principle of this double helix of science and magic is the literalization of all of what God can do. Okay? So previously only God could give life. Now humans can give life. They can't really, but again, when it's very difficult at a certain point to make blanket statements because everything can be lawyered. So, for example, if I were to say that God created the earth and God created the human race and God created this solar system, well, if you go into the esoteric literature, it wasn't God. Okay? It was... So God is in his abode. Okay? So God lives in his abode, which is the incomprehensible to us. Okay? And then out of that abode, there's an energy emanation. And when that energy emanation leaves the realm of God and goes into the realms that are ancillary to God, which God created as well, okay? The first thing that God created was the darkness. And out of the darkness, everything else came. And this is why you should not fear darkness. The void is they talk about the void in Buddhism. They talk about the void in Sant Mat, and when you get through the void, then you're in the realm of God. Very difficult to get through the void, though. You have to have a very strong, self-defined light to get through the void. Light, you have to be able to generate your own light to get through the void. You have to be almost like one of those phosphorescent or illuminated, luminescent fish at the bottom of the ocean. That's how you get through the void. But as we get down into these various dimensions, individuation takes form. Okay, so individuation is where you become, we are all individuations, those of us that are souled, and not everybody on this planet is souled. Okay? Sorry. There are many, many unsouled people on this planet. Kat was right about that. Some of the unsouled people are created by trauma, and some of them are clones. Some of them are other things. It's just sort of a horrid topic that I don't like to spend a whole lot of time on. But when you get down to, let's say, the solar systems and the galaxies, they're created by agents of the Creator. Okay? There's agents of the Creator that do these things. And I could give probably some names, but I don't think the names are important. Okay? The angels, all of the angels you hear referenced, the seraphim, the cherubim, those are all extraterrestrials. Okay? And if you think that I'm being glib when I say that, I suggest you look into the work of Pierre Sabek, S-A-B-E-K. For those of you who have bought The Light of Darkness, the afterword, the deconstruction of the Worshipful Fueler's crest was done by Pierre Sabek for Bob and I. And maybe it's good we look at a little Pierre Sabek first.
Hello, my name is Pierre Sabak. I am reading an excerpt from my book, The Murder of Reality, Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon. Chapter 43, Naked Snakes, Part 2. In the book of Exodus, Yahweh leads the Hebrews into the wilderness as a pillar of cloud. His appearance is equated in spoken Semitic with Shaddai, translated as Lord or God, reductive from Shed, Hebrew, a goblin, ghost, or ghoul. Shed in the modern translation is simply rendered as a devil. A god of death, Shaddai is variegated from the Semitic stem Satan or Shaitan, an adversary or an opponent, militaristic of the host and dragon. Shed philologically is related to the Hebrew word sod, a secret, extracted from the Arabic verb said to hunt, cognating the Judaic traditions with soed, a diner, implicit of an angel or reaper. Corporal manifestation of the demon Shed is contrasted with Sid, a gentleman, registered with the Sodalist or Zadok Brotherhood, aka the Black Nobility, Saudi or Sauda. In English, the play Sid and Shed is recorded as Civil and Seraph. Shaddai's College of Priests, the Sodi, discerns Siddur gentleman, derived from the Arabic noun Siddur or Seder, anatomical of the chest. Device of the heart, Hebrew Lev, Arabic Kalb, is comparable to the Levites and their offshoots Kabir, a lord. In the Old Semitic, Kabir is homologous to Keb, a snake, relative to Al-Kalb, the dog star. A messenger, Hebrew Kaba, distinguishes an angel, analogous to Cyrus al-Kalb. Kaba, messenger, articulates the verbal stem kebel, to receive, denoting the hidden traditions of the Kabbalah, from the Arabic word kaba, to hide. The message, Hebrew Shedder, implies a divinity, technically a demon, Shed, reserved originally to the Sodi and the Zadok priesthood. In the Egyptian mysteries, Shed demon is evinced from Shed, ritualized slaughter, and has connotations of one who destroys or annihilates. Shaddai's appellation, the god of destruction, is literally translated as the slaughterer. Celebrated as a fierce conqueror, a patron of war, Shed is prescriptive of killing and blood rituals conceptual to salvation. Apparition of the shed is equivalent to the reaper or reptile, in proximity to Seder field, conjunct with Seder and order and Siddur arrangement. The commandment Seder describes a ritual of the first night of Passover, inaugurating the death of the firstborn, termed Sod, a secret. Seder in Latin informs the stem Siddur, a person or thing that kills, recorded in the noun sadism. Hello, my name is Pierre Sabak. I will be reading tonight from an excerpt from my book, The Murder of Reality, Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon, paraphrased from pages 438 to 444, Man's Awakening. Philologically, the double, an apparition, proceeds from the Semitic stem dabar to talk relative to dabir, a sanctuary, nominal of dabar, a sacrifice. Debar talk and dabar votive in English is equivalent to the pun talk and take. In the Indo-European vocabulary, debar talk proceeds from the Sanskrit root deva, a deity transcribed as a devil. The root of devil is consistent with division, illusory, of Satan, cognate with the word and double. The ritual of appropriating an appearance, engineered through the double, the ditos, is conceived physically through the word. Verbalization of the word is likened magically to creation and intercourse, i.e. verbal and sexual. Liturgical connection between the spoken word and form, classified as the double, specifies an angel, Greek angelos, a messenger. To recapitulate, the Greek term angelos, an angel, is translated from the Hebrew word malach, an angel, obtained from the verbal root amar, to speak or command. Establishment of the word, Hebrew amira, agrees with the Arabic verbal root amara, a fleet, exhibited as the angelic host Ammon, congruous with the word and the manifestation of the double. Amar, to speak, is cognizant in Arabic with Amar Bana, a builder. Duplicitous, the double, registered as the word, reinforces the snake, iconic of the king, evidenced in the Arabic dialect. Akka, Syrian to talk, is relative to Akim, a sovereign, nominal of Akan, a flaming seraph. Inherent, the word denotes the substitute, embodied as the snake or king, represented as the double. Its appearance personifies the spoken word, a construct of form, commensurate with the multiple. For example, phoning to speak and feign a spirit. Derivation of the Arabic noun afar, a viper, is from the same family of words as the Hebrew noun kafel, double, paired in Arabic with kafara, atonement. The Latin word onement, or atonement, literally at one. English whole and holy. Atonement in the original context defines rebirth of an entity expedited through the blood of the substitute. Semitic traditions equates the substitute with the goat, a symbol of the changeling, homologous to rebirth. To conclude, the angel is a being that can change its corporal form from a dragon into a man through sound, personified as the word or double. Sacrament of the goat, Latin caper, extracted from the Hebrew etymon, kafala, double, specifies kafara, atonement, facilitated through blood sacrifice. Atonement, literally a simulation of the innocent, transubstantiation, portends to blood drinking, depicted as the logos word, conceptual to the vine, Greek lagios. Recurrent, the idea of bodily transfiguration or shape-shifting through ingestion of blood pervades throughout ancient mystery plays. Verification of this phenomenon is documented and supported in the Emerald Tablets, translated in the 1920s. Considered as a recent forgery, it is the author's contention the material, though of dubious authenticity, is derived from the hidden priesthood and recounts a metaphysical truth. Origins of the text are ascribed to the patron of writing, Thoth. The corpus of the Emerald Tablets bear striking comparisons to the angel cults scattered throughout the Middle East and Asia. In summary, Thoth's quotation reveals the essence of the mystery, accredited with the race of the serpent, the Anguagina. To quote, "In the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sight were they as are men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men amongst men. Crept they into the councils, taking form that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered, only by sound could their faces be seen. Came they to man and taught him the secret, the word that only a man can pronounce. Swift then they lifted the veil from the serpent, and cast him forth from the place amongst men." The sentiments of Thoth provides recourse for reflection. Progeny of the Seraph, ascribed initially to the Theban or Syrian and Western priesthood, is clandestine and protects its bloodline through secrecy. Classification of the Anguagina, alternatively the Serpentagina, records the serpent race, affiliated to the monarchical bloodlines of the ancient world. Offspring of the Anguagina masks its true form, obscured behind the human shell, a metaphor of the word double or spirit, embodied as the builder or mason. Afraid of being discovered, the snake chooses to hide behind a veil. A time is coming when the light shall shine, and the shroud shall be lifted for all to see. On this day the reptile shall stand naked, and Adam shall be restored to his bride. The children of men are ready to wake from their slumber and face the future together. Hello, my name is Pierre Sabak. I will be reading tonight from an excerpt from my book, The Murder of Reality, Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon. Chapter 18, Smiling Angels. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." And she added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." The quotation is from Genesis 21, verses 5 and 6. That is the Holy Bible International Version, Gideon. The patriarch Abraham is presented as a worshipper of angels, Hebrew Malach, apprised with the Canaanite deity Moloch, the harbinger of death. Throughout the original Semitic language, the killing of Isaac is obscured and operates on a number of complex wordplays pertaining to the ram and concealment. To consolidate the point, Abraham's firstborn son Isaac, Hebrew Itzshak, is translated in the Bible as he who causes laughter, from the verbal stem shoshok, laughter. The aetiological explanation of Isaac's name, according to the book of Genesis, signifies joy. See chapter heading. This assertion is based primarily upon the editor's interpretation that Sarah, his natural mother, conceived him in her 90th year. The name laughter, however, is significant in relation to child sacrifice. The point is salient. In the Babylonian traditions, angels specifically kill children through smiling at them. The smile in this context...
So there you go, you get the general idea. So Pierre and I became friends. Very, very serious fellow. One of the most serious people I've ever met in my life. He makes Jesuits look jovial. And the reason is the material that he's been tasked with in this life. And I highly recommend that if you have the time, you read The Murder of Reality. But let's just briefly talk about what Pierre was talking about there. So first of all, let me say that Pierre is a master symbologist on par with an Ezra Pound. He's a genius. And in a time where genius is not really recognized, at least not the kind of genius he has. Okay, genius may be recognized in computational design and artificial intelligence and all the things that the cult wants now, But if your genius rests outside of that, no, not at all. So Pierre systematically deconstructs all the words in the Bible etymologically and goes back to their ancient roots and finds out what they really are. And basically, it's revealed that you're talking about all of the aliens that are being literalized now. Okay, so you've got the gray aliens. Obviously, he talked there about the reptiles. It's his assertion through the etymology, the language research he's done, that the jinn of the Quran are just another way of saying the Naga from the Hindu scriptures, so reptilians, and again they're shape-shifting. And among these races, which operate mainly astrally, okay, so this is a thing that a lot of people get wrong, is that for the most part, this is an entirely astral phenomenon. And so the human agents who work with these people end up as kind of traffickers, if you will. But they traffic in what these entities want, what these beings want. And what these beings want is blood and sacrifice. They want the energy. They live and subsist on that. Okay? Now this is all very well detailed by other writers, other thinkers, other voices out there. Pierre Sabec being one. He pronounces it Sabac, so I suppose I should pronounce it the way he pronounces his name. You've got David Icke in this mix as a kind of pop or colloquial version of this, meaning that I don't think David does the kind of intense research that Pierre does, and a lot of David's information is intuited. Okay, it's just sort of given to him by whomever he's working with. So in this series of podcasts I've been doing on the devil in us, I have said several times that the Bible can be interpreted as a war between humanoid extraterrestrials like the Pleiadians and non-human extraterrestrials like the reptilians and others. And when we come down into physical form, there's a lot of people astrally associated with these negative entities. Now, if you're involved in one of these Abrahamic religions, it's no fault on you, okay? That what I'm saying is completely non-critical, non-judgmental. But the way that they have insinuated themselves into our consciousness is through the generational entrainment of scripture and mythology. Remember what I said in an earlier podcast when I was discussing Father Malachi Martin, the Jesuit, who was probably the most prolific exorcist of the 20th century. He did over 1,000 exorcisms, where it's understood in the literature and in the experience of the Catholic Church that most priests can't do an exorcism, and if they're suitable for exorcism, they might be able to do one or two. And it's understood that those one or two exorcisms will take anywhere from 1 to 2 decades off their life in terms of the energy taken from them. Okay? Now, what they never figured out, what Malachi Martin I don't think ever figured out, and I think at the top level, obviously, of the Catholic Church, they know. This is why you get the Serpent Cathedral and the new house of worship in St. Peter's Square, or in the region of the Vatican, within the Vatican City. You know, I've put pictures up in previous podcasts. If you're just engaging the material now, you can just go and do a Google search for new house of worship at the Vatican. and you'll see it. It's clearly a serpent. Okay? And so we get in the form of the Christ, the human sacrifice to the serpent. Okay? Now remember what I said in the first part of today's podcast, that in the time we're living now, all of the mythology will be literalized. Okay? Mythology, allegory, metaphor, these were things writers used in the past to describe things that had no literal language. They had no noun expression. Remember your English language. What's a noun? A noun is a person, place, or thing. Okay, what's a proper noun? It's a named person, place, or thing. So as a noun, I'm a man. As a proper noun, I'm Bruce McDonald. Okay? The language just didn't exist to explain these things in the past, not to the general public. So the people who wanted to get the information out would create allegories, parables, highly encoded language. But behind all of this has been a profoundly literal experience. And when I say it's astral, it's not entirely astral. Okay? Many of these species can manifest on the earth. They can manifest. Okay? So I go back to the example of Stardust Ranch. Okay? And John Edmonds describing how the Greys would enter his reality. This is, of course, after he's killed several of them with a samurai sword by chopping off their heads. So as you can imagine, the Grey, which is a kind of organic robot in which what we would call the blood is chlorophyll. It's not blood the way we have blood. Chlorophyll is what we could equate to the blood of plants. And so the body is really plant-based. That's what the Greys are, those bug-eyed little 3-foot bastards, okay? And they're a kind of organic robot. And we get this again in Alien Interview, where Errol tells Matilda that the body she's in is for her, as a conscious, immortal, spiritual being, a suit she slips into to have experiences in the third dimension. Okay? So it's literally a suit constructed to manifest into the third dimension. Now we're born here. Okay, so this is the natural organic process, the natural spiritual process to come into this 3D reality on this planet. Born of a woman, as they say in Macbeth. You know, you will be defeated by a man not born of a woman, which is a euphemism for a cesarean section, cutting the baby out of the stomach. Okay, so that's not born. Now John said when he would sometimes be sitting in his living room watching TV, and the space in his room would open up like the curtains of a shower curtain, and the head would just peek out like this. Couldn't see the body, you just see the face. So just imagine the reality right in front of you opening up and a head peeking out, looking around like this. And if the coast is clear, then the whole body steps through and enters into the 3D. John Edmonds described this as phasing in and phasing out. And he said you could shoot them, you could stab them, you could bludgeon them, you could beat them, but if you didn't cut their heads off, they could phase out. And the only way to keep them from phasing out was to cut their heads off. So look at the reality we live in now. My work is about synergizing a lot of things. I come from the place of a writer and a storyteller. I don't come from the linguistics or symbology of a Pierre Sabec. He's a much smarter person than me. Okay? I don't have all the experiences of a John Edmonds. or a Robert Wiegand, a true shadow walker, a man who can see, walk, and experience in the other side as easily as you and I see, walk, and experience in this physical reality. But they work with me because my talent is telling a story and putting the story out. And story is important because the human mind has been conditioned to receive information through story for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Information's good, but only a select group of people will understand information. You and I, assuming you're like me, I could be wrong, but you and I are not going to understand higher physics because we don't have the training in calculus, which is its own language. It's a mathematical language, okay? And so the direct experience of the theories of calculus are talked about among physicists through the language of calculus. We get the stories, and they're very bad storytellers. When you see these physicists interviewed on big podcasts, they are very bad storytellers, okay? Now, the interesting thing is, when you go back to the old allegories, the old myths, whether they be native myths or whether they be the Bible, but they have to be decoded the way Sabak has decoded them. When you go back to the Mahabharata in the Indian canon, which literally describes an ancient nuclear war. So there was nuclear war on this planet in the past. Okay? What you find in these ancient texts is they knew everything we're discovering now. And we've gone through this incredible sleep phase. We went to sleep. And now we're waking up again. And part of that waking up is horrible. I'm not going to lie to you. Part of that waking up is horrible. You know, people talk about spiritual awakening being a good thing. Look, it's horrible in the beginning. Okay? It's horrible. Because the first thing you become aware of, well, not necessarily. I was spared this information for the first 15 years, maybe 20 years of my spiritual practice. I was aware of it in an ancillary way. The meditation stuff that I studied and I practiced didn't talk about any of the Abrahamic stuff. It didn't talk about demons and jinn and all of these sorts of things. It was just very focused. We meditate to attain consciousness. We meditate to connect with the light of the Creator. And this is why we meditate. And I didn't think about any of these things. I've never used to think about these things. Was not a conspiracy theorist. And then one day, I can't remember exactly, it was like 2002 or 2003. I was walking through my home in the West End of Toronto. I was renting a 4-bedroom house. I had recently divorced or separated from my son's mother, and we lived about a block and a half apart, and we were co-raising my son. And I was literally walking into my study, and I had my computer and a desk in there and my computer chair, just like I have here now. And before I sat down at the chair, the entirety of what I'm discussing with you tonight was just downloaded into me. I know this sounds insane, okay? And of course it took me years to unpack it. But I remember before I sat down at the computer being overwhelmed by a kind of cosmic depression where I went, oh my God, it's this bad. And I had never thought about these things in the past. And something came in and it just said, okay, you've been sitting on the sidelines long enough. We need you. Here's the download. And when I started to unravel it, and this coincided with the emergence of the information on the internet and things like this. And back then, I mean, there was nothing really. I remember even like before. Can you guys even remember 2003? There's no YouTube, there's no BitChute, there's no Odyssey, there's no Rumble. They had this clumsy thing called Google Videos. Okay? And I remember coming across David Icke interviewing Arizona Wilder. And that was my first exposure to the living cult that on the planet. And then the next thing I came into contact with around 2005 or 2007 was the work of the Irish occultists Michael Sarion. And that just blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And I did not even allow myself, I took the information in because remember, it came as a spiritual directive. It came as a download. I didn't talk about it with anybody. I was ashamed that I even looked at this stuff. I was like a Karen or a Ken today in 2024. Oh my God, you go to BitChute? That's just for all that crazy alien nonsense and white supremacy. I didn't talk like that. I didn't behave that way. But I was a khaki-wearing, collared shirt office guy working as a senior technical writer on contract in software or telecommunications. And I didn't talk about this stuff with anybody. And then I quietly for a decade began to study all these things, buy books. And at first I thought, Bruce, you're going crazy here. You're getting way off spiritual path. Spirituality is about love, it's about light, and yes, you're still meditating and everything, but this is really dark stuff. Like, why are you exposing yourself to this? I used to have these dialogues with myself. But I knew I couldn't stop because of the way the information flow was started in me with that download in 2002 as I was going to my desk, cup of coffee the way I always do. And there was nothing I can do. From that point on, it was like a cosmic conscription. Okay? Now, many of you have heard the story of Stardust Ranch. I told it in all the podcasts we did. I told it in all the interviews that John and I did on the various big podcasts. He was very well connected. I started the book in 2012. I quit after 120 pages. I came here. My son built this house for me. I was living here. And then I had this internal nudge. Call John Edmonds. Finish that book you never finished. You have the time up here. You have the concentration up here. This is a perfect writing environment. Do it, Bruce. I called him up. I said, did you get that book written? And you guys know the story. But one of the things, when I tell the story in podcasts, I say, it kind of freaked me out working on the book. And it's true, it did. I mean, the hair on the back of my neck would go up sometimes at the keyboard. Okay? But one of the big factors in my quitting was I didn't want my name associated with a UFO book like this. I was still in the mindset that this is ridiculous. And I didn't have the courage to stand in public and tell my truth. I didn't have the courage, right? And it took me till 2019 to find that courage. We finished the book. We published it December 31st, 2019, and then 2 more books after it, The Light of Darkness. And so it all culminates in The Devil in Us, which is my attempt to return to the form of storytelling, to pass information on to you. But this story is more literal. It's not nonfiction. I tell it as a story. which is why I bookend it with my personal life, my upbringing, and then I close with coming over here and building this place with my son. And in between is the story of the 20th century, the story of the human race from the Industrial Revolution, which is the story of these negative extraterrestrials colonizing this planet. Okay? So let's circle all the way back. Blood. Why did I write a chapter on blood? Because blood is central to these negative beings. They drink it, use it, remetabolize themselves with it. They use it as a narcotic. Okay? They use human blood, especially adrenalized blood, the way you or I would use Miller Lite or a bottle of red wine or a bottle of vodka. Okay? So we're an intoxicant for these extraterrestrials, and we're food. Many of them literally eat human beings. Okay? So we have this human culture described in The Human Devil. Where does this culture come from? Well, its cover story, in keeping with the Bible, is they worship the devil. Okay? What's the devil? The devil is explained in my book, The Devil and Us. The devil is a cosmic entity, but the devil they're talking about, the Lucifer they're talking about, is their commiseration with these advanced race, more not really that advanced. A fourth dimensional race is not that advanced. Okay? And here's the kicker. We did this to ourselves. We invited these races in. At every stage, they're being invited in. Okay? Now let me explain something to you. If you contribute your psychic energy to the construction of the third temple of Solomon, and you're under some religious delusion that you're following God, you're literally building an embassy for these negative extraterrestrials on this planet. What goes on in those temples? Blood rituals. What did Pierre Sabac just say about these blood rituals? Okay? It's all out there. It's all right in front of you. It's not hidden. It's right in front of you. So we seem to be in a phase now. So the end times is their attempt to program us to believe we have to end. And when I say we, I mean human beings that are normally sold and not in commiseration on the fourth dimension with these negative entities, not enslaved to, not in relationship with, trading, commercial, spiritual, what have you, not in relationship with these beings. That it's the end of our time on this planet. And this programming has been epigenetically put into us for about 1600 years now. I believe the Apocryphon of John was written in the 400s. Right? I'm not sure. Could be. It's either 16 or 1500 years. It was one. I think it was the last book put into the Bible. Okay? But the Bible is a document of extraterrestrial commiseration. Okay? Now, in their defense, they don't hide it. You know, the fact that they put the book out there and they tell everybody is by cosmic law a form of disclosure. Here is our intent. Here's who we are. Here's what we mean to do with the human race in this planet. And given that they put it out there and we're too stupid to grasp what's going on, here's the kicker, folks. Much like law in a court, you can't go in and say, I didn't know about that law. The judge will say to you, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And it's the same out there. In the other dimensions, in space, it's the same out there. This is why these cultures are so procedural. This is why they're so fetishistic about the law. Look at these Jews. Look at these guys in the Vatican. Look at these imams in Islam. Look at them. Look at Jordan Peterson. The law, the law, the law, the law. They don't even know what they're fucking talking about. Not a fucking clue. Mixing some Boy Scout version of light and virtue into these biblical stories when that's not what they're about at all. At all. The rabbis know. The Cardinal of Colleges knows in the Vatican. Those motherfuckers running the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia, they know. Absolutely they know. And it's used to control the population. God's going to punish you. God's going to punish you. There's no hell on the other side except the hell you create by the love you withhold when you're alive. That's it. The blood, of course, goes back to the Temple of Solomon. It's a question of debate whether King Solomon actually existed as a historical figure, and whether the first temple actually existed. But the lore is a fascinating insight into the time and into the secret societies which revere Solomon, the great builder. If we want to make an extraterrestrial connection, the magic and bloodletting in the temple is reptilian. It's interesting to note that Jewish activist groups managed to get David Icke, the British writer and modern exponent of the reptilian presence on the planet, labeled as an anti-Semite. Equally curious is the official world's response to the reptilian theory. They think it's batshit nuts. But is it? All major Eastern religions reference the Naga, who were, yeah, you guessed it, shape-shifting reptilian humanoids. Even Buddha described them extensively in his sutras, exactly and quite literally as David Icke described them. The Temple of Solomon is a feeding center. There is no atonement for sin in these barbaric rituals. They are feeding and directing very dark entities. And what do these entities do? They affect the physical plane. Think of any ghost story you know about, one in which one or a small group of dead people haunt and torment a region for ages. What do you get? You get inexplicable physical phenomenon, things moving, levitating, doors opening and closing, bad dreams, negative emotions, perhaps even suicidal feelings. Amp that up several orders of magnitude and you are beginning to understand the Temple of Solomon magic. It's not meant to help humanity or provide a legitimate space for worship among true celebrants of God. No, not at all. More like a throne for a negative principality of immense power. This is what the Christian Zionists don't understand. They can't see the scope of it, the supernatural nature of multi-generational planning. They just can't see it. They are unwittingly bringing in this darkness because they have been led to believe it will herald the return of Christ, the most hated Jewish apostate in the Talmud, a soul stewing in boiling feces for all eternity, according to the rabbis. The hatred is the mark of their perversion. These racist Jews, these chosen people of God, cannot abide their not ruling the world with the rest of us as their slaves. It's pure evil. It's the same evil that stains the stones of the Mother of Darkness castle in Belgium. The same evil that has been creeping through Europe since Martin Luther, the Presbyterians, and the Anglican Church, all Jewish religions despite paying lip service to Christ. So no matter what happens going forward, you can't say you haven't been told. So how do you protect yourself against these dark forces on the fourth dimension? Well, there's a number of ways. Number one, you have to live morally. Morality is extremely important. The Buddhists say that if you live the 8 precepts of Buddhism, which is what the monk takes refuge in before enlightenment, once you're connected to the cosmic forces, the primordial forces, which are not beings, okay? The human being transcends the beings, and we go right back to the ocean of life, okay, where the souls come from. This is the magic of a human being. Spiritually, we're one of the most superior constructions in the entire universe. Okay? Our lives are short, but what we can accomplish in an 85-year life is mind-boggling. We are the envy of many of the advanced extraterrestrial races. So this whole thing is an extraterrestrial story. And I'm still seeing all these videos on YouTube with these Christian morons making complicated theses that these are demons. Okay, well, what's a demon? Okay, well, it's an original blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. Okay? Bullshit. Complete and total horseshit. They're other beings. Negative beings, just the way we use and abuse and consume pigs and cattle and lamb and goat and rabbit and chicken and turkey, they use and consume us. Remember what I said in the God and Gods podcast? If you're going to eat meat, love your animals. Okay? Give them a natural life in a natural setting, live on a farm, harvest your meat lovingly. I've heard stories how in antiquated times, the animals under a farmer's care would know when the farmer needed food and would voluntarily walk up to the farmer as a sign of, I'm ready to go. I want to feed you and your family and your community. Thank you for the life you've given me here. This is not a verbal exchange, okay? Many of the tribes in antiquity talk about being able to talk to the forest and saying, we need sustenance. And a deer comes forward and offers itself as a sacrifice to the tribe. Okay? Now this may have been the way it began with these reptilians and these others, because when you go back to that Sri M interview I played, where he describes the Naga, and he said, remember what he said, they've all gone back to Naga Lock. The ones that are still here were left here or stranded here. Okay? This is literal. It's not mythology. So what would happen to a stranded race here? They might become quite dark, don't you think? Quite dark indeed. And this is in fact what has happened. Different people give different versions of the same story, but it's the same story. It's very interesting to return again to the Abrahamic scriptures. Go right back to Genesis like I did in Blood Part 1. God rejects the fruit of Cain, and we're told Cain is the evil one. But he likes that Abel slaughtered a lamb for him and brought him the fatty portions and the best parts of the fairly young lamb. And they make a point of saying that this is a young lamb too. You know, even among meat eaters, there's people who find eating veal, baby cows, to be vile because the cow doesn't even have a chance to live. And this is the God that we're given in the Bible. Give it some thought. Okay? Now, I've become aware of the fact that it's necessary to counterbalance a lot of the things I say with positive things. Okay? So I can tell you from my own personal spiritual experience We are created by light. Okay, we come from a dimension that is almost incomprehensible, that we can do extraordinary things both here and on the other side, that we have it within us to master this physical reality and cure all diseases just with our consciousness, with no medicine, no instrumentation, no nothing. That we have the ability to go and explore all these other realms, like Nagalok and all these other realms and places where other beings live. We can go there just like they come here. And we can go right back to the Creator, right back to what Kabir calls the ocean of love and mercy. And we can produce and generate light within us. And I'm not talking about imagination. Imagination is derivative of light. I mean object light, the same way this lamp is lit right here. We can produce light within us. We can hear the music of creation, the melody of the Holy Spirit. We are not this pathetic and worthless species that these child eaters are trying to convince us that we are. We're not. We're strong, we're independent, we're powerful, we're beautiful, and we are loved by the Creator. Loved. I think that's enough for today. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.